Step out of the car. Now, the command cleaved through the stillness of morning like a serrated knife, jarring and absolute. The voice wasn't just loud, it carried an edge honed by years of unchecked authority. It didn't ask, it expected. Compliance. Marcus, unmoved behind his tinted sunglasses, blinked once. Slowly, the interior of the car still carried the distinct aroma of untouched new Italian leather, polished walnut veneer, and the faint residual warmth from a freshly ignited engine. His wrist, draped casually over the steering wheel, bore a timepiece with a price tag that could rival the down payment on a house. He sat with a composed posture, unbothered, like a man who had long ago stopped needing to prove himself. But the officer didn't see any of that. He wasn't looking. "You expect me to believe you own this car?" The cop spat, his tone curled. In disbelief, his hand resting ominously on the grip of his holster. The other gesturing to the gleaming black coupe like it was a crime scene. Around them, curious onlookers began to slow their steps. Cell phones quietly emerged. Heads turned, murmurs rising. Marcus exhaled long, steady, intentional. Every movement deliberate, every breath calculated. He reached toward the glove compartment with the caution of a man who had rehearsed this moment too many times in his life. "Don't move," the officer bellowed, his face reddening with a cocktail of power and fear. "Hands where I can see them." In an instant, the atmosphere thickened, electric with the threat of escalation. The air crackled with invisible tension. One wrong move could spark a tragedy. In the back of the growing crowd, someone whispered the thought so many had. Of course, he got stopped. "Look at that car." And that was the moment Marcus felt it sharp and bitter. This wasn't about a car. It never had been. Slowly, he opened the driver's side door and stood up, letting the light catch the embroidered crest on the breast of his custom-tailored jacket. It shimmered like a quiet declaration. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," Marcus said, his voice level.com, with an edge of unshakable resolve. The officer scoffed. "You don't get to request anything, sir." But Marcus didn't react. He didn't need to. He knew something they didn't. Something the crowd didn't yet realize. But they would. Soon Marcus, Elijah Cole, had never needed to be the loudest man in the room. He didn't raise his voice to command attention, he didn't have to. That morning, he wore dark jeans and a soft gray polo, his loafers shining with understated precision. No flashy logos, no overcompensation. His steps were measured, intentional, hinting at something deeper, something rooted in lived experience. He had come from a place where lullabies were drowned by sirens and where broken street lamps outnumbered dreams. Southside Chicago wasn't just his hometown. It was the crucible that had forged him. Raised by a mother who stitched hope into every dollar bill she scraped together on night shifts, Marcus had nothing handed to him but wisdom. "Never let them tell you who you are," she said once, and he never forgot it. By his teens, Marcus was selling candy at bus stations for pocket money, but to help put food on the table. At 17, he was sweeping floors at a mechanic's garage, but he watched, he listened. He learned how wealthy men moved, how influence whispered rather than shouted. By 24, Marcus launched his first business, a mobile detailing service operating out of a borrowed van. A decade later, Cole Automotive Holdings wasn't just a company, it was a juggernaut. Over 112 luxury dealerships across America bore his name. But none of that mattered now. Not to the officer, not to the crowd. To them, Marcus was simply a black man in an expensive car. That, in their eyes, was reason enough to suspect him, reason enough to treat him like a threat. He hadn't set out to make a statement that morning. But the world sometimes insists on dragging you into a spotlight you never asked for, and when it does, it forgets. Men like Marcus Cole don't speak loudly because they don't need to. They move mountains in silence, and this moment was shifting. The morning had begun clean. Almost unnaturally clean, the kind of pristine reserved for the wealthy. The showroom at Aston Drive glistened with marble floors, mirrored walls, and air so cold and fragrant it could have been bottled in Europe. Marcus entered like any customer. But the moment he walked through the crystal-clear doors, something invisible shifted. The receptionist's polite smile faltered. The security guard subtly leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Near the cappuccino bar, a white couple exchanged a glance and stepped aside, whispering. Marcus recognized it all. That look, he'd seen it before on tarmacs beside private jets, in luxury hotel lobbies, at board meetings where his presence felt like a misprint. It was the same silent accusation every time. "You don't belong here. Are you lost?" He didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he walked directly toward the vehicle that had drawn him, their jet-black coupe, gleaming under showroom lights, custom trim, V8 engine, stitched seats, that whispered luxury. This wasn't just a car, it was a symbol, a signal, a message. The manager approached, neck slicked back hair, expensive suit, clipboard gripped like a shield. Looking for something preoned, he asked, tone clipped with assumption. No. Marcus replied, eyes still on the car. I'm here to pick this one up. It's under my name. There was a beat of silence. Then the performance began. A tight smile. The exaggerated scroll through the keyboard. The arch of an eyebrow. When Marcus handed over his ID, then came the line. Ah, you're Mr. Cole. Like it hurt to say. No congratulations followed. No handshakes. No enjoy your new car photo. Just paperwork, exchanged like a secret. As Marcus walked toward the coupe, keys in hand, he passed a clipboard-holding woman whose clenched jaw said what her eyes wouldn't. The car unlocked with a soft chirp. The leather embraced him, the engine purred. And for a single, fleeting moment, Marcus allowed himself peace. But peace is fragile. And 5 minutes later, it shattered beneath flashing lights and a voice sharp enough to cut through glass. Step out of the vehicle. Now. He placed the car in park. Rolled the window down with deliberate calm. The officer who approached was textbook white, mid-40s. Mirrored sunglasses reflecting his own authority back at him. His hand hovered close to the weapon at his waist. You in a hurry, sir? He asked, with the kind of performative politeness that barely concealed suspicion. No, Marcus answered, measured. Just picking up my new car. The officer's expression twisted. This car, he asked, leaning in. You're saying this belongs to you? Marcus nodded. Yes. You got proof of that? Marcus moved slowly, cautiously, retrieving the dealership paperwork from his glove box, still warm, still fresh. Before he could even fully extend his arm, the cop snatched it away and read aloud, like reciting foreign scripture, Marcos, The name tasted strange in his mouth. By now, the sidewalk had grown crowded. Passers-by stopped, phones raised. Whispers stirred the air like wind before a storm. Looks like a rental. Bet he stole it. That's not his car. The officer didn't return the papers. Instead, he waved over a second squad car. This individual is suspected of vehicle theft, he announced loudly. Requesting backup. Marcus's heart dropped. Excuse me, he asked. You're a suspect in a potential grand theft auto case, the officer barked, raising his voice for the audience now watching. Gasps echoed. Marcus stepped out slowly, hands in clear view. A second officer arrived, young, uncertain. His eyes met Marcus's, hesitated, then fell in line behind the older cop. They began frisking Marcus right there, on the sidewalk, in full view. His blazer was yanked up. His belt tugged. A suit worth thousands reduced to crumples beneath rough hands. Sir, you need to calm down, the officer said, though Marcus hadn't moved. I am calm. Marcus replied, his jaw tightening. Then stop resisting. He wasn't, but resistance isn't always physical. Sometimes, it's simply existing with dignity. Being black. Being successful. Being unafraid. Phones were rolling now, capturing every frame. A woman asked, why are they doing this? He showed them the papers, said another. I saw it. No one stepped in. But no one looked away. Then came the final crack. The line that ignited something deep inside Marcus. You don't look like someone who drives one of these, the officer sneered. Loud. For the cameras. For the control. Marcus inhaled, fists clenched at his sides. He thought about walking away. He almost did. But not this time. This time, he stayed, because something had to change. The cuffs clicked around his wrists with cruel efficiency, tight, cold final. Marcus stood still, allowing himself no expression as his arms were pulled behind his back, the fine tailoring of his jacket bunching. Unnaturally, his breath was shallow. His shoulders ached. The crowd had grown thicker now. Phones everywhere. A live stream passed 1,000 viewers in minutes. Comments poured in. He showed proof. This is messed up. Isn't that Marcus Cole? A child across the street began to cry. Her mother whispered something, holding her close. Marcus kept his eyes forward. Don't flinch. Don't break. The first officer turned him to face the crowd, deliberately rough. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "This is disgusting." Another, "If he were white, they'd be offering him coffee." And then it came loud enough to ripple across the bystanders. "Wait." That's Marcus Cole. And suddenly, the name began to spread. A murmur, then a buzz. Recognition cracked the tension like thunder before a downpour, but the officer didn't care, or didn't believe it. He leaned in close, just loud enough for Marcus to hear, but quiet enough to pretend it wasn't said. You people love playing pretend. Rich, but this time, you got caught pretending. Those words echoed through Marcus's skull like a hammer striking glass. His eyelids fluttered shut, not to escape, but to absorb the weight of it. He'd heard that phrase before, plenty of times, spat or whispered. In meeting rooms, elevators, even from so-called peers in luxury circles. But hearing it now in a street in broad daylight, in front of dozens of onlookers, with his expensive suit wrinkled, his wrists tightly bound, and his dignity bleeding out onto warm concrete, cut far deeper than it ever had before. It wasn't just humiliation, it was public execution of character. He recalled something his mother once told him, when he was still a boy learning how the world sees black men who don't apologize for success. Humiliation, she said, is when they take away everything you own except your name. And even then, they'll try to steal that too. Marcus took in a long, steady breath, held it, released. He could end all of this right here, right now. One phone call, one flick of a business card, one name dropped, and this charade would collapse like cheap scaffolding. But something deeper within, a voice older than his own ego, whispered firmly, not yet. Let them keep talking. Let them go further. Let them dig the hole so deep they can't climb out, because when the fall came and it would be spectacular. Just as the second officer reached for the backseat door, another voice rang out, slicing through the noise like a church bell during a thunderstorm. Wait, stop right there. It wasn't the voice of a commander or a news reporter. It was young, clear, sharp with conviction, but trembling on the edges. Every head in the crowd turned instinctively. From behind the small sea of spectators, a young woman pushed forward. She couldn't have been older than 22. With thick brown curls yanked into a messy ponytail and a red dealership name tag bouncing against her chest. Her hands were shaking, but her feet were rooted in concrete. I work here, she said, the words nearly catching in her throat. That man didn't steal the car. The first officer turned slowly, one brow rising in skepticism. Excuse me, he's a registered customer, she said, firmer now. I helped prep his paperwork this morning. The car is under his name. You can call the manager if you don't believe me. Marcus, still seated and silent, tilted his head just slightly. He didn't recognize her. He didn't know her name, but she knew him, and more importantly, she recognized the truth for what it wasn't, spoke up anyway. The two officers locked eyes on her. The younger cop started to respond. Miss, we're in the middle of a no, you're not, she interrupted, cutting clean across his excuse. You're harassing a man who bought one of our most expensive vehicles. He showed proper ID. I personally verified it. You're making a mistake. A ripple passed through the crowd, the kind that grows into a tidal wave. She works there, someone whispered. They messed up bad. Phones raised higher. One man muttered, oh, this is about to go viral. Another began streaming. It-lived commentary layered with disbelief and anger. Staff just confirmed that's the CEO. Cops are in trouble now. The older officer's expression shifted slightly. His jaw clenched. He glanced at Marcus again, then at the woman, then at the lenses of half a dozen phones now capturing every detail. Something had changed. Marcus could feel it, not a victory yet, but a shift. The wind no longer blew against him. And then, from the dealership doors, the manager finally emerged. He looked panicked, pale, with beads of sweat forming at his temples, as he jogged toward the scene. What the hell is going on here? He panted. The young woman pointed directly at Marcus. They were trying to arrest Mr. Cole. The manager's eyes widened as recognition dawned like a slap across the face. Mr. Cole, he repeated, the name catching in his throat like it was made of thorns. Oh God, there's been a misunderstanding. He stammered to the officers. He's a VIP client, he owns. I know what I own, Marcus said, voice low but slicing through the air like ice. The crowd gasped audibly. One officer instinctively took a step back. Marcus finally turned to face them fully, his eyes calm, but burning, his posture composed, but unyielding. I'm tired, he said, of being a misunderstanding. The older officer tried to regain footing. Sir, we're just following protocol. Marcus cut him off. Flatly. Another camera lens zoomed in. Somewhere, A journalist's fingers were flying across a keyboard. A story was being born. The young employee took another step forward, lowering her voice just enough so only Marcus could hear. "You don't have to stay quiet," she whispered. "Not today." Marcus gave her a brief nod, not one of gratitude, but one of respect. Because in every war, every injustice, there is always someone, just one, who throws down their fear and says, "Enough." But the older officer wasn't finished, because power, when it's exposed, doesn't shrink back quietly. It strikes. The moment someone in the crowd shouted, "That's Marcus Cole," the officer's face twisted. Fury, embarrassment, something dark. He didn't like losing control. He especially didn't like being corrected, especially not by a woman half his age with a red plastic name tag. Without warning, he turned, snatched the dealership folder from the roof of the car, and flung it across the pavement. Paper exploded, like shrapnel. Title documents, the VIN registration, all caught by the wind. Now scattered and trampled. "You think throwing around names changes the law?" he snapped. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't rise, didn't even blink. The crowd roared in protest. "What the hell, man?" someone shouted. "He just threw the guy's documents." Another voice rang out, furious. "You're gonna lose your job, bro." The officer's eyes flicked between the crowd and Marcus. Rage was brewing. Then, like a fuse burning out, he snapped again. He stormed to the car, shoved the door open with force, and hissed, "I said, this vehicle is still under investigation. I don't care who you claim to be." Marcus turned his head slowly, eyes locking with the officer's. Not anger, not fear. Just a sudden, chilling clarity. "You're going to regret that," he said, calm as a blade. The officer sneered. "I'm not scared of corporate threats, Mr. Fancy Suit. I've seen your type before." Marcus replied, eyes never wavering. "Clearly, but have you ever actually seen me?" The manager looked like he might faint. The young woman covered her mouth, phones inched closer. The wind caught one of the papers and sent it fluttering past Marcus's feet like a fallen flag. And then the officer made his final mistake. He leaned against the car roof, slapped it twice with condescension, and barked, "Hope you kept the receipt. This baby's getting impounded." Silence. Cold. Devastating. Car. Marcus had designed it. His engineers had hand-built the prototype. His company had funded every inch of its production. This wasn't just any luxury vehicle. It was the future of his brand. And now, this uniformed man, this nobody, had mocked it like a stolen trinket. Marcus's breath slowed. No violence, no threat, just movement. He reached slowly inside his jacket, the crowd freezing as one. The officer took a cautious step back. From his inner pocket, Marcus withdrew a sleek, black leather card case. He opened it carefully, deliberately, then pulled out a single, matte black business card and laid it on the hood like a final domino. The officer leaned forward, glanced down. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Marcus didn't answer, just held his gaze. Then finally he smiled. "You'll want to read it," he said. "Because in 5 seconds, your whole world's going to change." The card gleamed in the sunlight like it had been waiting for this moment. Heavy stock, embossed gold lettering, and in proud, bold font, Marcus Elijah Cole, Chairman and CEO, Cole Automotive Holdings Private Line, executive use only. The officer picked it up like it might explode. "Read it twice." His mouth fell open. Words failed him. The crowd pushed forward, electric with disbelief. Wait, did he just say CEO? Cole Motors. Like the Cole Motors. Someone near the back gasped, "Oh my God, he owns the dealership." "This is the direct vehicle authorization form," Marcus said firmly, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "Signed by our internal board." He handed over the sleek document, its embossed letterhead glinting slightly under the sun. "That vehicle," he continued, nodding toward the luxury electric sedan now surrounded by curious onlookers and officers, "is part of our executive test fleet specifically designated for senior-level transport." Simmons, the higher-ranking officer nearby, scanned the paper quickly. His brows rose in acknowledgement as he nodded once. Marcus didn't wait. He turned another page with precision. "And here," he said, gesturing to a second file, "is the city contract." His voice was calm, composed, but laced with a quiet fire. "Cole Automotive Holdings is currently the second largest vendor in your city's electric patrol cruiser program. We supply over 38 of your active duty vehicles. Nearly half your department drives something we built." A few officers, the ones who had flanked him moments ago, blinked in disbelief. Their silence wasn't from shock, alone it was dawning recognition. But Marcus wasn't finished. Not even close. He tapped a few keys on the tablet in his hand, switching to another screen with practiced ease. "And this," he said, tilting it toward Simmons, "is the donation slip funds earmarked for the youth justice grant that your department uses for community outreach." The screen glowed with an official seal, time-stamped and verified. "I funded that," Marcus added quietly. "Out of pocket. Last year. Privately." For a moment, Simmons said nothing, just stood there, inhaling slowly, letting the weight of it all settle. Around them, the crowd that had gathered was silent, unnervingly so, not because they were confused, but because they were witnessing something none of them had expected. Reach, influence, undeniable receipts. All spoken with grace and unshakable certainty. Marcus glanced at the officer, still clutching his ID card, as if it might disprove everything. "I don't typically throw around credentials," he said, his voice lower now, almost intimate. "But when someone's dignity gets dragged through the dirt, facts have a way of speaking louder than silence." The officer opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then the younger one stammered awkwardly. We didn't know, you didn't ask," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. His eyes didn't hold malice, only disappointment. He turned his attention to the nearby media cameras now zoomed in on his every move. "This isn't new," he said. "This isn't rare. This is the daily reality for people who look like me." He paused, just for a second, before adding, "The only difference today." His tone shifted. "Most of them don't happen to own half the block." A wave of emotion swept through the crowd, part shock, part admiration. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about what he represented. A few people chuckled, not out of mockery, but out of a shared pride, like watching someone take a win on behalf of everyone who never got the chance. Reporters snapped into action, voices flying across the square. "Mr. Cole, will you press charges? Is this going viral? What message do you have for the officers involved?" Marcus raised a hand. Just one. And the questions died instantly. "One thing at a time," he said, before walking slowly toward the officer who had first drawn suspicion. He stopped just a few inches away in anger, no raised voice. Just a stare that cut deeper than any shout. "You judged the surface," Marcus said. "But real power." He leaned in slightly. "It doesn't need to introduce itself." Turning away, he addressed Simmons again. "I want a full review," he said firmly. "Not just of this officer, but of the entire division. Every recorded stop made in the past 6 months." Simmons gave a single nod, the tension in his shoulders returning. "And I want community representatives present during the audit," Marcus added. "Because this doesn't end with me walking away quietly. It ends when it stops happening entirely." The crowd erupted not into chaos, but into conviction. Applause rang out. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. This wasn't justice yet, but it was the start of momentum. The officer took a step back, then another. But the cameras didn't follow him anymore. Their lenses stayed locked on Marcus, whose presence had become the axis of the moment. The officer muttered, "I was just following protocol. You matched a description for a reported vehicle theft. It was coincidence." The words came out soggy, like paper dissolving in rain. No one was buying it. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Then why'd you throw his documents?" Another voice joined in, "And why'd you kick the damn door?" Phones were raised again, this time, not out of curiosity but condemnation. The younger officer didn't even try to defend him. He had already stepped back, arms folded tight, looking like he wanted to sink into the pavement. The store manager, sensing things spiraling, stepped forward and tried to defuse the situation. There's been some confusion. Emotions are running high, but the woman from earlier, her eyes blazing, wasn't having it." "No," she snapped. "Tension didn't make you ignore his ID. Tension didn't make you throw his papers in front of hundreds of people. That was humiliation. That was deliberate." The manager faltered, clearly out of his depth. Marcus still hadn't said a word. He simply stood there, arms crossed, gaze steady, the weight of silence doing what shouting never could. Because sometimes silence isn't passive. Sometimes it's the sharpest blade. Finally, the officer looked at Marcus directly. "I didn't know who you were." Marcus tilted his head slightly. His reply came like a whisper but landed like thunder. "And if I were no one?" The crowd stirred again. Because that was the question. That was the whole damn point. What if he hadn't been rich? What if he hadn't had documents or contracts or charity receipts? What if he were just another black man driving a nice car? The officer's mouth moved, but the words failed, and the mood in the crowd shifted. It wasn't just anger at the officer anymore. It was awareness of the machine behind him. The system that let this happen every day. People didn't boo, they didn't scream. They simply turned away. Phones lowered. Faces blank. Like stepping over something discarded. And the officer stood there, alone, exposed not by violence, but by truth. Marcus turned back to Simmons. "Get me the precinct head," he said simply. Simmons was already reaching for his phone. Because this wasn't about making a statement anymore. It was about making a change. And Marcus Cole wasn't done writing that script. 15 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. No sirens, no bluster. Just silent recognition of what was coming. The precinct chief stepped out, tie loosened, forehead damp with sweat. He knew. Everyone knew. Marcus stood still, hands behind his back, posture flawless. Like a CEO preparing for a quarterly review, not a man ambushed on a sidewalk. "Mr. Cole," the chief began, forcing a polite smile. "On behalf of the department, I'd like to personally apologize." Marcus raised a hand. "No need," he said coldly. "I'm not here for apologies." The air turned sharp. "I'm here for accountability." The chief blinked, caught off guard. "Of course, we're reviewing the body cam footage. There weren't any body cams turned on." Marcus cut in. Silence. "I already pulled your department's public data," he continued. 6 black drivers stopped for every white driver in this district. Complaints against officers doubled last year. And last month, one of your men tackled a black teenager outside a shopping mall, just for looking suspicious. No charges, no reprimand. He let the words hang. Then added, "And I didn't have to dig. It's all public record." The chief swallowed. "What would you like us to do?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Immediate administrative leave for Officer Dunley," he said, nodding toward the older cop who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "And I want a third-party audit of every single traffic stop conducted in this precinct over the past 12 months. The chief opened his mouth, but Marcus wasn't done. "Effective immediately," he said. "Cole Automotive is freezing all donations, discounts, and service contracts with your department until that audit is complete." Gasps spread through the crowd. Real ones. The kind that hit like a gut punch. That decision would cost the city millions. But Marcus wasn't finished. "The funds," he said, "will be redirected to an independent legal defense fund for victims of racial profiling." Starting today, the cheers that erupted weren't polite applause. They were raw. They were real. One voice shouted, "That's how you do it." The chief looked stunned. This will go public," he muttered. Marcus didn't smile. "It should," he said, with quiet finality. Simmons opened the car door for him, this time carefully, respectfully. Marcus gathered his papers and stepped inside. Just before the door closed, he looked back at the crowd and said softly, "This wasn't revenge." He paused. It was a reminder. The door shut, but the impact didn't. It echoed across the city. 1 week later, Marcus stood in a high-school gymnasium. No cameras, no fancy suits. Just rows of young faces, some curious, some hardened by experience. He didn't talk about contracts, or stock prices, or fleet numbers. He talked about walking into rooms where people had already decided who you were. He talked about knowing the difference between silence as strength and silence as surrender. Then, he looked at a boy in the front row. Hoodie up, head down. "You," Marcus said softly. "If someone sees less when they look at you, don't waste energy proving them wrong. Use that energy to become so undeniable, they can't look away." The boy looked up, straightened. Someone clapped in the back. Marcus smiled. "Your worth," he added, "isn't proven when you win a fight. It's proven when you don't need to raise your voice to own the room." He stepped off the stage to applause that felt earned, not forced. A moment later, as he crossed the parking lot, a little girl chased after him. "Is it true?" she asked. "You really own all those dealerships?" Marcus chuckled. "Some," he replied. "But what I really own," he looked up at the sky, "is the right to never be underestimated again." He winked. "Want to see a prototype no one's ever seen before?" Her eyes widened, and he opened the door. Because the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's inspiration.